Stories start now. The dog that walked with me. I'm going to tell you about the day I learned what it means to truly connect with another soul, the day I held death in my lap on a busy summer street, and the day I gained a friend who would walk beside me long after his heart stopped beating. But first, you need to understand something. I was just a kid, 10 years old. The kind of kid who spent summer days riding bikes until the streetlights came on, catching fireflies in mason jars, and believing that the world was mostly good. I didn't know much about death. I didn't know much about pain. And I certainly didn't know that a single moment could split your life into before and after. The summer had been long and hot that year. The kind of heat that makes the pavement shimmer and stick to your sneakers when you walk. School had let out weeks ago, and every day felt exactly the same. Wake up late, eat cereal straight from the box, play outside until mom called you in for dinner. Those were simple times, easy times, the kind of days where your biggest worry was whether you'd be picked first for kickball or last. That particular morning started like any other. I had woken up to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window, the sound of birds chirping outside, and the smell of toast coming from the kitchen downstairs. I remember pulling on my favorite jeans, the ones with the hole in the knee that Mom kept threatening to throw away, and a t-shirt that was probably too small, but I loved it anyway. I wolfed down breakfast without really tasting it, shouted goodbye to Mom, and headed out the door. The street outside my house was always busy during the day. Cars rushing here and there, people walking quickly with their heads down, thinking about whatever adults think about. Meetings, bills, deadlines, things that didn't matter to a 10-year-old kid on summer vacation. I had my whole day planned out. First, I'd head to Tommy's house down the block. Then maybe we'd go to the corner store and buy some candy with the allowance money burning a hole in my pocket. After that, who knew? The whole summer stretched out ahead of us like an endless adventure. I was about halfway down the block when I heard it. The screech of tires. That sound. You know the one. The sound that makes your stomach drop and your heart freeze. The sound that tells you something terrible has just happened. The sound that cuts through traffic noise and conversation and everything else like a knife through butter. I turned toward the sound. Everything seemed to slow down in that moment. I saw the car, a dark blue sedan, coming to a stop in the middle of the street. I saw the driver's face through the windshield, his eyes wide, his mouth open. I saw other people on the sidewalk stopping, turning, looking, and then I saw the dog. He was lying in the street right in front of the car, a stray. You could tell by looking at him. His coat was dirty and matted. Like he hadn't had a decent meal in weeks. The kind of dog that nobody owned. The kind of dog that nobody wanted. The kind of dog that most people would cross the street to avoid. But in that moment, lying there on the hot pavement, he wasn't a stray. He wasn't a nuisance or a problem to be dealt with. He was just a living thing that was hurt and scared and alone. I started walking toward him without even thinking about it. My feet just carried me forward, like they knew what to do, even if my brain hadn't caught up yet. Other people were gathering too, adults mostly. They formed a circle around the dog, craning their necks to see, pushing and jostling against each other like they were at some kind of show. The driver had gotten out of his car by this point. He stood there looking annoyed more than anything else. Not sad, not guilty, just inconvenienced. Like this hurt animal in front of him was nothing more than an obstacle that had delayed his day. He was checking his watch, glancing around at the gathering crowd, probably thinking about all the places he needed to be. The traffic had slowed to a crawl. Some people were even pulling out their phones, probably to take pictures or videos. to share with their friends later, to post online with some caption like, "Crazy thing I saw today," with a bunch of emojis. And in the middle of it all was the dog. Was the dog. His eyes were moving, darting from face to face in the crowd around him. All these strangers, all these loud voices, all this chaos. I could see the fear in his eyes, the confusion. He didn't understand what had happened, didn't understand why he was suddenly the center of all this attention, didn't understand why his body hurt so much. I pushed my way through the crowd of adults. They were all taller than me, their bodies blocking my view, their voices creating a wall of sound that pressed in from all sides. I heard fragments of conversation as I squeezed between them. Poor thing. Where did it come from? Somebody should call animal control. Just ran right out into traffic. What a mess. Nobody was doing anything. They were all just standing there, watching, talking, observing this animal's pain like it was entertainment. Like it was something happening on a TV screen instead of right in front of them. I made it through the crowd and stepped into the circle. The dog was right there, just a few feet away. I could see him clearly now, could see the blood, could see the way his chest was rising, falling too quickly. Could hear the sounds he was making. He was howling, but it wasn't loud. It was weak, pitiful, the kind of sound that reaches into your chest and squeezes your heart until you can't breathe. Every howl was filled with pain and fear and sadness. The sound of a creature that didn't understand why it was suffering, that didn't know help was coming, that thought it was going to die alone, surrounded by strangers who didn't care. I don't know what made me do what I did next. I was just a kid. I didn't have any training. I didn't know anything about helping hurt animals, but something inside me said that this dog needed someone, not someone to stand and stare, not someone to take pictures, someone to actually be there with him. So I sat down on the curb. The concrete was hot against my legs. I could feel it through my jeans. The sun beat down on my head and shoulders. I could smell the blood in the street and the exhaust from all the idling cars. But none of that mattered. I reached out, moving slowly and carefully, and I lifted the dog's head. It was heavier than I expected. It warm, oh man, sticky with blood. I placed it gently on my lap, positioning it so he wouldn't have to look up at all those faces anymore. So he could just look at me. Blood started seeping into my jeans immediately. I felt it, warm and wet, soaking through the fabric. Blood was coming from his mouth, dark and thick. More blood than I had ever seen in my whole life. It scared me, but I didn't move. I didn't pull away. The dog kept making those sounds, those heartbreaking, weak howls. Each one felt like it was cutting right through me. I looked down at him and our eyes met. Have you ever really looked into an animal's eyes? I mean, really looked? Not just glanced or observed, but actually connected? It's different from looking into a person's eyes. There's something pure about it. Something honest. Animals can't hide what they're feeling, can't put on a brave face or pretend everything is fine. What you see in their eyes is the absolute truth of what they're experiencing in that moment. And what I saw in this dog's eyes was fear. Pure, absolute fear. Fear. But something else too. A question, a plea, a desperate reaching out for comfort from someone, anyone who might care. I started talking to him, quietly, softly, the kind of voice you use when you're trying to calm a scared kid after a nightmare. I don't remember exactly what I said. For I said something like, "It's okay, and you're not alone, and I'm here with you." Words that probably didn't mean anything to him, but I said them anyway. Because sometimes the words don't matter. It's the tone, the feeling behind them. I stroked his head. His fur was rough and dirty under my fingers, but I didn't care. I kept petting him, slow and gentle, running my hand from the top of his head down to his neck and then back again. Over and over, a steady rhythm. something for him to focus on besides the pain. And then something strange happened. The world around us just disappeared. I know how that sounds. I know it doesn't make sense, but it's true. One moment I was aware of everything. The crowd, the traffic, the noise, the heat, the smells, all of it pressing in on me from every direction, and then it was gone. It was just me and the dog. Nothing else existed. We were alone together in our own little bubble, separated from everything and everyone. In that space, there was no fear, no pain, no chaos. Just two living beings sharing a moment of connection that went deeper than words or understanding. I kept crooning to him, kept stroking his head, kept looking into his eyes and willing him to feel safe, to know that he wasn't alone, that someone cared, that his suffering mattered to at least one person in this world. Everything's going to be all right, I whispered. I said it over and over like a promise. Like if I said it enough times, I could make it true. The dog was looking back at me with an intensity I had never experienced before. It felt like he could see right into my soul. Like he was reading me, understanding me, trusting me in a way that went beyond anything I could explain. And slowly, gradually, the howling stopped. His breathing, which had been rapid and panicked, started to slow down, to even out. The tension in his body began to release. I felt it happen under my hands, felt him relax, felt him let go of the fear. Calmness descended over both of us like a soft blanket. The pain was still there. I knew it was, but somehow it didn't seem to matter as much anymore. We had found something bigger than the pain, something more important. We stayed like that, looking into each other's eyes, connected in a way I couldn't put into words. His breathing became normal, steady, almost peaceful, and then he became very still. I kept petting him, kept talking to him in those soft, quiet tones, kept telling him it was okay, that he could rest now that he had been so brave. A minute passed. Maybe two. Time felt strange in that bubble we had created together, and then I felt it. The moment when the life left his body. It wasn't dramatic. There was no big final breath or shudder. He just stopped. One moment there was something alive in my lap. The next moment there wasn't. I had never been that close to death before. Had never actually felt the exact instant when a living thing becomes not living anymore. I sat there, my hand still on his head, looking down into eyes that no longer looked back. But here's the thing that I couldn't explain then, and still struggle to explain now. I wasn't scared, I wasn't traumatized or horrified or any of the things you might expect a 10-year-old kid to feel. Instead, I felt comforted. I had done something important, something that needed to be done. This dog hadn't died alone, surrounded by strangers who saw him as nothing more than an inconvenience. He had died being held, being comforted, being told that he mattered, that his life had value, that someone cared. In those final moments, I had given him the only thing I could give: my presence, my compassion, my willingness to sit with him in his pain and fear and not look away. And somehow, in some way I couldn't quite understand, that seemed to matter. It seemed to help. I don't know how long I sat there with his lifeless body in my lap. Could have been seconds. Could have been minutes. Time still felt slippery and strange. Gradually, like a camera lens slowly coming back into focus, the world around me phased back in. I became aware of the crowd again. The voices, the traffic, all of it rushing back in like water filling a space that had been empty. I could hear conversations happening around me clearer now. The drone of voices discussing what had happened like they were commentators at a sporting event. Dog just ran right out into the street, one man was saying. He sounded matter-of-fact about it, like he was describing the weather. Council needs to do something about all these strays, another voice chimed in. They're becoming a real problem. probably diseased anyway, someone else added. Better this way. I looked up from the dog, a tear running down my cheek, and stared at these people. These adults. These grown-ups who were supposed to know better, supposed to be wiser, supposed to care. But they didn't care. Not really. They were already moving on. Already thinking about their next meeting or their grocery list or whatever else. Filled their days. To them, this had been nothing more than a brief interruption. A minor delay on their way to somewhere more important. Some of them were already walking away, marching off toward their offices and cubicles with their heads held high and their briefcases swinging at their sides. Back to their important adult lives where dead dogs on the street were nothing more than unfortunate incidents to mention at lunch. Did you see that dog that got hit this morning? Crazy, right? Right. And then they'd take another bite of their sandwich and move on to talking about last night's game or some office drama. I felt confused by their apathy, by their coldness. How could they see what I had just seen and feel nothing? How could they witness a death and just shrug and walk away? And I was only 10 years old, but even then I understood that something was deeply wrong with the way these people were reacting, or not reacting. Some fundamental human qualities seemed to be missing from them. Some basic sense of empathy or compassion or recognition that all life has value. I got up slowly. My legs were stiff from sitting. My jeans were soaked with blood, heavy and sticky against my skin. I looked down at my hands. They were covered in blood too. Dark red, starting to dry in the creases of my palms and under my fingernails. I left the dog's body where it was, there on the street. Animal control would come eventually. Someone official would deal with it. That wasn't my part to play. My part was done. I had been there when it mattered. I had made sure he didn't die alone and afraid. Die alone and afraid. I had given him comfort in his final moments. That was what I could do. That was what I had done. I started walking away from the scene. The crowd was already dispersing. The traffic was moving again. The driver had gotten back in his car and driven off, probably running late for whatever appointment he had. Life was returning to normal for everyone else, but not for me. As I walked, I could feel something, a presence, like someone was walking beside me. I didn't turn to look, didn't need to look, didn't need to. I just knew the dog was with me. Not his body, obviously. His body was still lying on that street waiting to be collected and disposed of. But something else. Some part of him that was more than just fur and blood and bone. We walked together, the dog and me, away from that busy street. Away from those uncaring faces. Away from the place where he had died. I didn't look back. There was no point. What was behind us was finished. Done. We were moving forward now. The walk home felt longer than usual. Every step was heavy. Oh, yeah. My jeans were stiff with drying blood. I could feel it pulling at my skin with each movement. People I passed on the sidewalk stared at me, at the blood. Some looked concerned. Some looked disgusted. One lady even crossed the street to avoid walking near me. I didn't care what they thought. Didn't care about their stares or their judgments. I had done something that mattered, something important. What did it matter if they didn't understand? But I did start thinking about other things as I walked, about death, about what happens after, about whether animals have souls and where they go when they die. I had gone to church a few times with my grandmother, listened to the preacher talk about heaven and souls and eternal life, but he always talked about people, about human souls, never mentioned anything about animals. Did dogs go to heaven? Did strays? Did this particular dog who had just died on a busy street with a strange kid holding his head? I didn't know. Still don't really, eh? But I felt like something of him had continued, had persisted beyond that moment when his breathing stopped and his eyes went blank. How else could I explain the feeling I had walking home? That sense of companionship, that certainty that I wasn't alone. When I got home, Mom took one look at me and gasped the blood. She saw the blood and went pale. "Oh my God, what happened? Are you hurt? Were you in an accident?" She was all over me, hands running over my arms and legs, checking for injuries, eyes wide with panic. "I'm fine, Mom," I said. "It's not my blood." That didn't seem to calm her down much. Then, whose blood is it? What happened? So I told her about walking down the street, about hearing the screech of tires, about the dog lying in the road, about how everyone just stood around doing nothing, about how I sat down and held him while he died. I watched Mom's face as I told the story. Saw the panic fade and be replaced by something else, something softer, sadder. She pulled me into a hug, not caring about the blood on my clothes getting on her shirt. "I'm so sorry you had to see that, baby," she whispered into my hair. That must have been so scary. "It wasn't scary," I said, pulling back to look at her. "I mean, it was at first, but then it wasn't. It felt like the right thing to do, like I was supposed to be there." Mom looked at me for a long moment, her hands on my shoulders. "You're a good kid," she said finally. "A really good kid? Come on, let's get you cleaned up." She helped me upstairs to the bathroom, helped me peel off the bloody jeans and shirt. They were ruined, she said. No amount of washing would get that much blood out. She'd have to throw them away. I didn't care about the clothes. But I did care about washing the blood off my hands. I watched it spiral down the drain, red water turning pink and then clear. My hands looked normal again, clean, like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. Mom made me take a shower. A long, hot one. The water beat down on my head and shoulders, washing away the last physical traces of what I'd experienced. But it couldn't wash away the memory, the feeling, the connection. That night at dinner, I barely ate. I was too busy thinking, replaying the events in my mind, examining every detail. Every moment, trying to understand what it all meant. Dad noticed. "You okay, sport? You're not eating your spaghetti." Spaghetti was my favorite. Mom had made it special because she knew I'd had a rough day, but I couldn't seem to work up an appetite. "I'm fine," I said, just thinking. "And about the dog?" I nodded. Dad set down his fork and looked at me seriously. "Your mom told me what happened. What you did, that was a brave thing. Not many kids your age would have done that." "I wasn't brave," I said. "I was just there. Someone had to be there with him. It couldn't be nobody." "That's what brave means," Dad said. "Doing what needs to be done even when it's hard, even when it scares you, even when everyone else is too afraid or too selfish to do it themselves." I thought about that. Thought about all those adults standing around doing nothing. Thought about the driver who looked annoyed instead of sorry. Thought about the people who walked away without a second glance. Why didn't they help him? I asked. All those grown-ups, why did they just stand there? Mom and Dad exchanged a look. One of those silent parent conversations that happen without words. "Sometimes people don't know what to do in a crisis," Mom said carefully. "They freeze up, they panic. They wait for someone else to take charge." And sometimes, Dad added, his voice harder, people just don't care. They're so wrapped up in their own lives, their own problems, that they forget to see the things that really matter. They forget to be human. I went to bed that night thinking about humanity, about what it meant to be human. About whether being human meant being kind and compassionate, or whether it meant being selfish and indifferent. I had seen both sides that day. The worst of humanity in that crowd of onlookers. But maybe the best of it in myself, in what I had chosen to do. I hoped I was right about that. Hoped I hadn't been foolish or naive. Hoped that what I did had actually mattered. I went to bed that night thinking about the dog. About his eyes, about the way he had trusted me in those final moments, about the connection we had shared. I wondered if I had imagined that feeling, that sense of really truly communicating with another living being without words. But then, I saw him. I was lying in bed, almost asleep, when I opened my eyes and there he was, sitting in the corner of my room. Not bloody or hurt like he had been on the street, just sitting there, whole, healthy, looking at me with those same eyes. I wasn't scared. I should have been, maybe. A dead dog appearing in my bedroom in the middle of the night. That's horror movie stuff, right? But I wasn't scared at all. I felt comforted. He stayed for a moment, just looking at me, and then he was gone, like he had never been there at all. But he came back. Over the next several months, I saw him 2 or 3 times a day, every day, sometimes more. I'd be in the garage helping Dad with some project, and I'd look up and there he'd be, lying in the corner, just watching me with those calm, peaceful eyes. I'd be playing in the yard, and I'd catch movement out of the corner of my eye. I'd turn and see him, lying under the tree, or trotting along the fence line, or just sitting there in the grass. Sometimes I'd see him when I was walking to a friend's house. He'd be across the street, or half a block ahead, always there, always watching over me. My favorite memory was the beach. It was a sunny afternoon, perfect for swimming. I had gone to the beach with my family. While my parents set up the umbrella and the cooler, I headed straight for the water. There was a pontoon floating out past the breakers, the kind that kids are drawn to like magnets. A challenge, a destination, something to swim to and claim and then jump off of. I waded into the water and started swimming. The water was cool and clear. The sun was warm on my shoulders. I could hear the sounds of the beach behind me. Kids laughing, parents calling, the general happy chaos of a summer day. I swam to the pontoon, pulled myself up onto it, and stood there catching my breath. I looked back toward the shore, squinting against the sun to see where my family was. And that's when I saw him. The dog was sitting on the sandy beach, right at the water's edge. His fur looked clean and dry. His posture was relaxed and happy. And he was watching me, waiting for me, making sure I was safe. I stood on that pontoon and looked at him for a long moment. I raised my hand and waved. I know how crazy that sounds, waving at the ghost of a dead dog, but I did it anyway. And I swear he wagged his tail. Nobody else could see him. I figured that out pretty quickly. When I mentioned him to my parents, they just smiled and nodded the way adults do when kids talk about imaginary friends. When I pointed him out to other kids, they'd look where I was pointing and just shrug. They couldn't see what I saw. He was mine alone, my secret companion, my guardian. The first few weeks after the accident were the strangest. I was still processing what had happened, still thinking about the blood on my hands and the feeling of holding a dying animal and watching the life leave its eyes. Mom had asked me several times if I was okay. If I wanted to talk to someone about it, a counselor maybe, someone who could help me work through what I had experienced. But how could I explain to her that I wasn't traumatized, that I wasn't having nightmares or feeling scared, that instead I felt strangely at peace, that I had gained something from that experience rather than lost something? I tried to tell her once, tried to put into words what I felt. We were sitting at the kitchen table. She had made me hot chocolate even though it was summer and way too hot for it. But she knew it was my favorite, and I think she thought it might help me open up. I'm not sad about the dog, I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. I mean, I am. But not in the way you think. She looked at me with those mom eyes, the ones that see right through any lie or half-truth. What do you mean, honey? I'm sad he got hit. I'm sad he died. But I'm not sad about being there with him. That part felt Right, like it was supposed to happen that way. Like it was supposed to happen that way. Mom reached across the table and took my hand. You did a very brave thing, a very kind thing. You gave that poor animal comfort when nobody else would. But it wasn't just about being kind, I tried to explain. It was bigger than that. We connected, really connected, really connected. I know that sounds weird because he was just a stray dog and I didn't know him, but it felt like we knew each other, like we were meant to find each other that day. Mom squeezed my hand but didn't say anything. I could see in her eyes that she didn't quite understand what I was trying to say. How could she? She wasn't there. She didn't feel what I felt, so I stopped trying to explain it. I kept it to myself, my secret. The thing that I knew but couldn't share because words weren't big enough to hold it. But Scout understood. Every time he appeared, I felt that same connection all over again. That same knowing. That same deep recognition of something important passing between us. School started again in September. I was going into 5th grade. New teacher. New classroom. Some new kids who had moved to town over the summer. Everything felt different after what had happened. I felt different, like I was carrying something inside me that set me apart from everyone else. The other kids talked about their summers. Tommy went to camp and learned how to canoe. Sarah's family drove to Disney World and she wouldn't stop talking about all the rides she went on. Marcus got a new bike and spent every day riding it around the neighborhood. When it was my turn to share, I almost told them about Scout. Almost explained about the accident and sitting on the curb and the connection we shared and how he was still with me. But I looked around at their faces and I knew they wouldn't understand. They'd think I was weird, or lying, or making up stories for attention. So I just said I had a pretty normal summer, hung out with friends, went swimming a lot, nothing special, but Scout was there that first day of school. I saw him as soon as I got off the bus. He was sitting under a tree near the playground, watching me with those calm eyes. Nobody else noticed him. Kids were running past, screaming and playing, and not one of them looked his way. He was invisible to everyone but me. I smiled at him. Just a small smile. A secret acknowledgement between the two of us. And then I headed into the building. Having Scout around was like having a secret superpower. Whenever I felt nervous or scared or unsure, I'd look around and there he'd be. A steady reminder that I wasn't alone. That someone was watching over me, that I had someone who understood me completely, even if nobody else did. There was this kid in my class named Derek. He was bigger than everyone else. Meaner too. The kind of kid who liked to push other kids around and take their lunch money and make them feel small. One day in October, he decided I was going to be his target. I was at my locker after school, putting my books away when he came up behind me. I didn't hear him coming. Didn't know he was there until I felt his hand on my shoulder, spinning me around. "Hi, kid," he said, getting right in my face. His breath smelled like the cafeteria pizza we'd had for lunch. I need to borrow some money. I knew what borrow meant coming from Derek. It meant give. It meant hand over your money and don't expect to see it again, and don't even think about telling a teacher, "I don't have any money," I said. Which was true. I'd spent my allowance over the weekend on comic books. Derek's face got red. His jaw clenched. "I don't like liars," he said, and he grabbed the front of my shirt, pushing me back against the lockers hard enough that I heard the metal clang behind me. I felt scared. Really scared. My heart was pounding. My mouth went dry. Derek was a lot bigger than me, and I knew from watching him with other kids that he wasn't afraid to throw punches. And then I saw Scout. He was there in the hallway, sitting about 10 feet away, just sitting there calmly, looking at me, at us. His presence was like a cool breeze on a hot day. Like a hand on my shoulder saying it's okay. You're okay. You can handle this. Something shifted inside me. The fear didn't go away completely, but it became smaller. Manageable. I looked Derek right in the eye, and I spoke in a calm, steady voice that surprised even me. Let go of my shirt. Derek blinked. He wasn't used to kids standing up to him. Wasn't used to anyone not backing down. What did you say? I said, let go of my shirt. I told you I don't have any money. If you don't believe me, you can check my pockets yourself. But either way, you need to let go of me. We stared at each other for what felt like a long time. I could see Derek trying to figure out what to do. Whether to escalate and actually hit me. Whether to back down and lose face. Whether to call my bluff. I didn't look away. Didn't blink. Kept my eyes locked on his the same way I had kept my eyes locked on Scouts that day on the street. Direct, steady, unafraid. Finally, Derek let go. He shoved me one more time against the lockers, but it was half-hearted. A face-saving gesture more than anything. Whatever, he muttered and walked away. I stood there for a moment, my heart still pounding, and looked at Scout. He was still sitting there in the hallway. If dogs could smile, I swear he was smiling. Proud of me. Happy that I had found that strength inside myself. And then he was gone. And he was gone. That's how it went. Scout showing up in the moments I needed him. Not to do anything. Not to protect me physically or solve my problems for me. Just to be there. To remind me of what I had learned that day on the street. That I was capable of more than I thought. That I could face hard things. That I could be brave even when I was scared. My relationship with my parents changed too, not in any dramatic way. Just little shifts, little moments of understanding that hadn't been there before. Dad and I were working on a model airplane. It was a complicated kit, one we'd been working on together for weeks. We were at the stage where we had to glue tiny pieces together with tweezers, and I kept messing up. Getting glue on my fingers, dropping pieces, putting things on backward. I was getting frustrated, ready to quit. Ready to throw the whole thing away and declare the project a failure. Dad must have seen it on my face because he put down his tweezers and looked at me. You know what I admire about you? He said. I looked up, surprised. Dad wasn't usually one for heart-to-heart talks. What? Whoa. What you did with that dog, that took real courage, real compassion. Most people, most adults even, would have just walked away. But you sat right down in the middle of that street and you stayed with him. You gave him comfort even though it was hard. Even though it was scary. That's the mark of good character, son. That's the kind of thing that defines who you are. I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight. My eyes stung a little. I just did what felt right. I managed to get out. Exactly, Dad said. You listen to your heart instead of your head. You listened to your heart instead of your head. You didn't overthink it or worry about what other people would think. You just acted. That's a rare quality. Hold on to that. We went back to working on the airplane, but something had changed. I felt like Dad saw me differently now. Not just as his kid, but as a person. Someone worthy of respect and admiration. And I worked harder on that airplane, slowed down, paid more attention. And you know what? We finished it. It turned out beautiful. One of the best models we ever made together. Scout was there that day to... I saw him through the garage window sitting in the driveway. Watching. Always watching. Winter came. Then spring. Then summer again. A full year had passed since that day on the street. I was 11 now. Getting older. Growing up. But Scout remained constant. I started noticing things about his appearances, patterns. He never showed up when I was happy and everything was going well. Only when I was struggling, when I needed support or courage or just a reminder that I wasn't alone. When I failed a math test and felt stupid and worthless, Scout was sitting in my room that night when I went to bed. When my grandmother got sick and ended up in the hospital, and I was scared she might die, Scout was there in the hospital parking lot while we visited her. When I got in a huge fight with Tommy, my best friend, and thought our friendship was over, Scout was lying under the tree in my backyard when I ran outside to cry. He always knew. Somehow, he always knew when I needed him. I started to think of him less as a ghost or a vision and more as a guardian angel. My own personal protector sent to watch over me. Maybe not to keep bad things from happening, because bad things still happen, but to remind me that I could get through them. Then I was stronger than I thought. 7th grade was hard. Middle school is hard for everyone, I think, but it was especially hard for me. I was small for my age, quiet, not particularly good at sports or music or any of the things that make you popular. I had my small group of friends, but we were all kind of the misfit kids. The ones who didn't quite fit anywhere. There was this girl, Melissa. She sat 2 rows over from me in English class. When I was 18 and had to decide what college to go to and felt overwhelmed by the weight of that decision, I looked for Scout. And this time, he was there, but different somehow. Fainter, like he was slowly fading. Like he was getting ready to say goodbye. I sat on my bed and looked at him. Really looked at him. Tried to memorize every detail. The shape of his ears. The way he sat. The expression in his eyes. I'm going to be okay, I told him. You taught me how to be okay. He looked at me for a long moment. And then, for the first time since that day on the street, I heard him. Not with my ears, but with that same deep connection we had shared, that same knowing. I know, he said, I've always known. And then he was gone. I waited for him to come back. Looked for him over the next few days and weeks, but he didn't appear. At first I felt sad, lost, like I had been abandoned by my oldest friend. But gradually I came to understand. Scout had done his job. He had watched over me, guided me, helped me grow from that scared 10-year-old into someone stronger, someone braver, someone who could face the world without needing a guardian angel to remind him. He was capable. It was time for me to walk alone now, not because he didn't love me anymore, but because I was ready. It was time for me to walk alone now, not because he didn't love me anymore, but because I was ready. Years have passed since then. Many years. I'm an adult now. I have a job and responsibilities and all the complicated, messy parts of adult life that seemed so mysterious when I was 10 years old. I think about Scout often, about that day on the street. About all the times he appeared to me over those years, about what it all meant and continues to mean. I never told anyone the full story. Never explained about seeing him after he died, about how he watched over me, about how he helped me become who I am. People wouldn't understand. They'd think I was crazy or making it up or remembering things wrong. But I know what happened. I know what I saw. I know what I felt, and that's enough. Sometimes I wonder if I was the only one, if Scout appeared only to me, or if maybe he appeared to others too. Other people who needed a guardian. Other kids who needed to know they weren't alone. Maybe I was just one stop on a longer journey. One person in a long line of people he was meant to help. I like to think that's true. Oh, that Scout's purpose didn't begin and end with me. That he's out there somewhere still, watching over someone who needs him, helping them find their courage, helping them become who they're meant to be. I work with animals now. Not as a veterinarian or anything formal like that. But I volunteer at the local animal shelter. I help socialize the dogs that come in scared and traumatized. I sit with the ones that nobody else wants to spend time with. The ones that growl or cower or shake with fear. I sit with them the way I sat with Scout. Calm, patient, present. Well, and I talk to them in soft, quiet tones. I tell them they're safe now, that they're going to be okay, that someone cares about them. I think Scout would approve. The other volunteers sometimes ask me how I do it, how I connect with the difficult dogs, the ones that other people have given up on, the ones that seem beyond saving. I never know how to explain it. How do you put something like that into words? How do you explain that when you've sat with a dying animal on a busy street and looked into its eyes and felt that connection? Every other connection becomes easier. That once you've experienced that depth of understanding, you can find it again? So I just shrug and say something about patience, about not giving up, about believing that every animal deserves a chance. But inside, I'm thinking about Scout, always Scout. I got married 3 years ago. My wife is amazing, kind, compassionate, the kind of person who rescues spiders from the bathtub instead of squashing them. The traffic behind me immediately started flowing again, everyone rushing off to wherever they needed to be, probably already forgetting about the idiot who stopped in the middle of the road for a stray dog. I took the dog to the emergency vet, got it checked out, fed, cleaned up. It was in rough shape, but nothing that couldn't be fixed with some time and care. The vet asked if I wanted to keep it or surrender it to the shelter. I thought about Scout, about that day on the street, about all the times he had been there for me, about all the lessons he had taught me. I'll keep him, I said. My wife named him Lucky, said he was lucky I had been there, lucky I had stopped, lucky I had cared enough to help. But I think I'm the lucky one. Because every time I look at Lucky, I think about Scout, about how one moment of compassion on a hot summer day changed my entire life, about how one connection with a dying animal taught me everything I needed to know about what it means to be human. Lucky is doing great now. He's gained weight. His coat is shiny and healthy. He follows me around the house like a shadow, like he can't quite believe he has a home and a person who loves him. Sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I'll look at Lucky sleeping in his bed and I'll see another dog superimposed over him. A different dog. Cleaner, calmer, with eyes that have seen beyond this world. Scout? Still watching, still there, still walking with me after all these years. I'm older now than my parents were that summer when everything happened. Old enough to understand things I couldn't understand then. Old enough to see the bigger picture. That day on the street wasn't just about saving a dog, wasn't just about giving comfort to a dying animal. It was about learning who I was, who I wanted to be, what I valued, what mattered. It was about learning that compassion is a choice. That kindness is a decision you make every single day. That being human means seeing suffering and choosing to do something about it, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, even when nobody else will. Those adults standing around the dog that day, they were making choices too. Choices to remain distant, to stay uninvolved, to protect themselves from the discomfort of caring, to prioritize their schedules and their convenience over the life of a suffering creature. I could have made the same choice. I was just a kid. Nobody would have blamed me for walking away, for leaving it to the adults to handle, for not wanting to get blood on my clothes and death on my hands. But I didn't walk away. And that decision, made by a 10-year-old kid on a hot summer day, rippled out through my entire life, changed everything, made me who I am. I'm a better person because of Scout, a kinder person, a braver person, a person who stops in traffic to rescue stray dogs, a person who volunteers at shelters, a person who sees animals as beings worthy of respect and compassion and love, a person who understands that we're all connected. all part of the same web of life, all deserving of dignity in our final moments. As the months went by, I started to understand why he was there. It wasn't random. He always showed up when I needed him most. When I was nervous about the first day of school after summer ended, I saw him waiting outside the building. When I got in a fight with my best friend and felt terrible about it, he was there in my room that night. When I fell off my bike and scraped my knee badly enough to cry, I looked up and there he was, sitting on the sidewalk nearby. He never did anything, never barked or moved much, just was there. A steady, calm presence that reminded me I wasn't alone, that I was loved, that I was being watched over. I never knew his name when he was alive. Nobody did. He was just a stray, a nameless dog that nobody wanted. But after he died, I gave him a name, Scout. Because that's what he was, my scout, going ahead of me, watching over me, making sure I was okay. I'm older now, much older than that 10-year-old kid sitting on a curb with blood on his hands. And I don't see Scout as much as I used to. The visits became less frequent as I grew up. First daily, then weekly, then monthly. Now it's been years since the last time. But I still remember him. I still remember that day. And I still remember what he taught me. He taught me about compassion, about showing up for someone who needs you, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, even when nobody else will. He taught me about connection, about how we're all linked together in ways that go beyond what we can see or touch or prove, about how a moment of real connection can transcend death itself. He taught me about presence, about the power of just being there with someone in their pain, not trying to fix it, not trying to make it go away, just witnessing it, sharing it, and making sure they're not alone. And he taught me about love. The kind of love that isn't about ownership or obligation. The kind that just is, pure and simple and unconditional. I've had other dogs since, the pets that I chose and raised and lived with for years. I've loved them all. But none of them touched me the way Scout did. None of them changed me the way he did. Because Scout came into my life for just a few minutes, a handful of heartbeats, shared on a hot summer street. And in those few minutes, he gave me something I've carried with me every day since. He gave me the knowledge that I could make a difference, that I could matter to someone, that I could ease suffering, even if only for a moment, that I could be the person who shows up when everyone else walks away. I think about him still, wonder about him sometimes, wonder if he's happy wherever he is, if he's running free somewhere with clean fur and a full belly, if he remembers me the way I remember him. But deep down, I know the answer. He was a good dog. The best dog. The best dog. A dog who taught a 10-year-old kid about what it means to truly care. And yes, I think he's happy now. Just like I know, beyond any shadow of doubt, that he's still walking with me, still watching over me, still there in the moments when I need him most. Because that day on the street, we made a promise to each other. I didn't know it at the time. Didn't understand what was happening, but I understand now. I promised to be there for him in his darkest moment, to not let him die alone and scared, to give him comfort and peace and the knowledge that his life had mattered to someone. And he promised to be there for me, always, in whatever form he could take, for as long as I needed him. We both kept our promises, the dog and me, walking together forever. Next one's stories start now. The Midnight Passenger. There are some nights that change you forever. Some experiences that shake the very foundation of what you believe is possible in this world. My friend learned this the hard way on a cold night in Pune. And even now, 3 years later, he cannot talk about it without his hands trembling and his voice dropping to a whisper. Let me take you back to that night. Let me tell you exactly what happened on that dark stretch of road between Nigdi and Talwade. This is not a story meant to entertain you. This is a warning. This is the truth about something that should not exist, but does. My friend worked at a software company in one of those sprawling tech parks that have taken over Pune. You know the kind. Glass buildings that look impressive during the day, but turn into cold, empty structures once the sun goes down. He was a developer, stuck in the endless cycle of deadlines and client calls and code reviews that never seemed to end. On that particular night, he had been working late again. The office was almost empty by the time he finally shut down his computer and packed his bag. It was already past midnight when he walked out into the parking lot. The security guard gave him a tired nod as he signed out. The night air was cool, almost pleasant after the artificial chill of the air-conditioned office. He pulled out his helmet, started his bike, and began the familiar journey home to Talwade. The roads were mostly empty at this hour. That is one thing about Pune that he actually enjoyed. Unlike the daytime chaos of honking cars and weaving auto rickshaws, the night brought a strange peace to the streets. Streetlights cast long orange shadows across the pavement. The occasional truck rumbled past on the highway. Otherwise, it was just him and his bike and the sound of the engine cutting through the silence. He had made this journey hundreds of times before. He knew every turn, every pothole, every speed breaker. From his office to Nigdi was about 20 minutes. From Nigdi to his apartment in Talwade was another 10 or 15 minutes depending on traffic. At this hour, there was no traffic. He could make good time. The bike hummed smoothly beneath him as he navigated the familiar streets. His mind was already shifting to thoughts of home. A hot shower. A hot shower. Some leftover food from the fridge. Maybe an episode of whatever show he was binge watching at the time. Then sleep. Blessed sleep before another day of the same routine started all over again. He passed through Nigdi without incident. The small shops were all shuttered for the night. The tea stalls that did brisk business during the day were dark and empty. Even the street dogs seemed to have found somewhere warm to sleep. The road ahead stretched out before him, a ribbon of asphalt lit by pools of orange street light. That was when he saw the figure standing by the side of the road. At first, it was just a shape in the darkness between two streetlights. As he got closer, he could make out more details. A man, standing very still, watching the road, watching him approach. My friend felt a small flutter of unease in his stomach. Something about the way the man stood was odd, too still, too focused, but he pushed the feeling aside. This was India. People were out at all hours for all sorts of reasons. Maybe the man's bike had broken down. Could my friend really just drive past someone in need? He slowed down. The bike came to a stop about 10 feet from where the man stood. The man walked forward. He was ordinary looking. That was the strange thing. My friend told me later that he tried so hard to remember specific details about the man's face, his clothes, anything distinctive. But there was nothing. He was just a man, average height, average build, wearing what looked like regular clothes, though my friend could not recall exactly what. It was as if the man's features refused to stick in his memory. "Brother, can you give me a lift?" the man asked. His voice was normal, polite even. "I need to go to Talwade Crossroad, just 5 minutes from here." My friend hesitated. The unease in his stomach grew stronger. Something about this did not feel right, but he could not put his finger on what exactly was wrong. The man seemed harmless enough. And Talwade Crossroad was practically on his way home anyway. It would only be a small detour. "Please, brother," the man said again. "I've been waiting here for a long time. No one will stop. I really need to reach Talwade." That decided it. My friend nodded and gestured for the man to get on the bike. What was the harm in helping someone out? It was just a short ride. 5 kilometers at most. Most. 10 minutes and he would drop this man off and continue home. He kicked the bike back into gear and pulled away from the curb. The distance from Nigdi to Talwade was not far. The road was straight and well lit. My friend opened up the throttle, accelerating to about 60 kilometers per hour. The bike responded smoothly. The wind rushed past his helmet. Everything felt normal. He tried to make conversation at first. Asked the man where exactly he needed to go in Talwade. Why he was out so late. The usual small talk you make with a stranger. But the man said nothing in response. My friend called out the questions louder, thinking maybe the man could not hear him over the sound of the engine and the wind. Still nothing. My friend shrugged it off. Maybe the man was tired. Maybe he did not speak much. Some people were just quiet. It did not matter. They would reach Talwade in a few minutes anyway. The street lights flashed past in rhythmic intervals. Dark, light, dark, light, dark, light. The road was completely empty. Not a single other vehicle in sight. Just the two of them on the bike, cutting through the night. Feuja. My friend knew this route so well he could have driven it with his eyes closed. He knew exactly when the Talwade crossroad would appear. The big intersection with the traffic lights that never worked. The closed shops clustered around the corner. The bus stop with faded advertisements. All familiar landmarks that told him he was almost home. The crossroad came into view ahead. My friend began to slow down. A bike decelerated smoothly from 60 to 50 to 40 kilometers per hour. He pulled over to the side of the road near the bus stop and brought the bike to a complete stop. Item that took Talwade Crossroad, my friend said, putting one foot down to balance the bike. Where do you need to go from here? Silence. Sir, my friend said a bit louder. We are here. Where do you want to go? Still silence. A cold feeling crept up my friend's spine. Slowly, very slowly, he turned his head to look back at the pillion seat. It was empty. There was no one there. The seat behind him, where the man had been sitting just moments before, was completely empty. My friend stared at it in disbelief. He blinked, looked again, still empty. He turned fully around, looking all around the bike, scanning the dark street in every direction. The man was gone, completely and utterly gone. My friend's heart began to pound in his chest. His breathing came faster. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead despite the cool night air. His hands shook on the handlebars. This was not possible. This could not be happening. He had been riding at 60 kilometers per hour. Anything other than accepting the alternative. But he knew. Deep down, in a place beyond rational thought, he knew that what happened was real. He had given a ride to something that was not entirely human. Something that existed in the shadowy spaces between the normal and the impossible. If you ever find yourself riding alone late at night through the area between Nigdi and Talwade and Puna, and you see someone standing by the side of the road asking for a ride, do not stop. No matter how harmless they seem, no matter how much your conscience tells you to help a stranger in need. When the comfortable assumptions about how reality works get stripped away, you start questioning everything. I think about the location too. Why that specific stretch of road between Nigdi and Talwade? What makes that place special or different? Is it the site of the original accident? Brief glimpses of impossible reality that shatter our comfortable assumptions and leave us changed forever. My friend was changed by his encounter with the vanishing passenger. He will carry that experience with him for the rest of his life.